All right, I'll close with this one. So about a year and a half ago, I think it was the beginning of last year, Vince came up with this idea. So every day the leadership team, some people on the leadership team get together every day and they go over, daily numbers and that sort of thing. And every Friday consistently, since we've been into business together, every Friday at 8 o'clock, we've had an all leadership meeting. We do it from 8:15 to 9. The only reason one has ever been missed was a holiday, or that's it, honestly. It's never been skipped, it's never been anything. About a year and a half ago, Vince came up with this idea where instead of, and we all know Vince, this was an idea that just took something off of his plate. But it ended up being a brilliant idea. And what he did is he assigned a leadership member to give a leadership moment at each one of these meetings. So we opened the meeting with gratitude, and then someone on our leadership team gives a leadership moment. Y'all, we have learned about archery. We've learned about plants. We've learned about plants. We've learned about plants. Delicia's on the leadership team, in case y'all didn't know. So, we've learned about the Mariana Trench. We've learned about, what are some other mushrooms? We've learned about music.
We've learned about, it was the
Dorval's gas.
comic.
Yeah, the gas crater. Anime.
Anime one, there was a.
Mycelium.
Yeah, what Kristen did one on Beyonce and her album, her country album. So
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss has been one,
A
and
children's book.
and all of them have been tied back to a leadership lesson. And I have to tell you, like, all joking aside, it's been such a blessing for my role to just watch this and watch the creativity and the effort we put in. So this week in particularly was Holly's week. And Holly sent a message to the leadership team yesterday and said, hey, in preparation for tomorrow's leadership moment, you have homework. Okay, so point number one of her brilliance, because she knew she wasn't going to try to share the screen and have us watch an 8-minute video, because whenever we do that via Zoom, it's fun. And she shared the lyrics to this song called High Ren. I'd never heard of it. It was about an 8-minute song, and we all listened to it ahead of time. And we had this discussion this morning about our inner critic, and how the inner critic shows up and how it impacts us. And this discussion, which is normally about 15 minutes, probably took 20, 25 in there. And y'all, it was one of the most fulfilling discussions that I've had with a group of people that I've had in the longest time. Partially because I didn't talk a lot, mainly because I couldn't, because I was trying not to cry, because I was just so impressed and moved by it. But the leadership that we have in this organization that does that kind of stuff is amazing. And just the rawness of the material today, because we talked about, mental health struggles. We talked about, just what we deal with on a daily basis, and how this whole thought of your inner critic and the battles that we do are not necessarily battles. They're a dance. They're a pendulum. This stuff's going to show up, and sometimes stuff's showing up all the time, and the pendulum's over here, and sometimes it's way over here, and it's not showing up at all. And just to have that discussion was a blessing. So I would share it anyway, but I definitely share it just because Holly, just as a side note, Holly is an amazing individual. She is like just an amazing human. So just to have her just kind of start the day on that, I'm very grateful for that. It's great. So when you see her, give her a hug, pat on the back, and everything, and then props to Vince and all the leadership team. So that's my gratitude. I'll be at LinkedIn. So, all right. So what do y'all want to talk about today? How's the market?
How's the market?
How's the market? How are you guys doing? We had our masterminds this week. We had a big event. We had a lot of events this week. We had masterminds. We had the real producers last night. We've had some training. We've had a lot of discussions. I love Fridays in this office or in this building, because a lot of jets are coming in from Harris Island. So this is going to be fun today. How's the market? How are y'all doing?
Good,
Good. All right.
not great. Good.
Not great. All right. What does good, not great mean?
I think houses are sitting.
Okay. Houses are
Talk
sitting
about
longer. What else?
It's a market where you earn your business now.
Okay. You earn your business now.
And that's why this is so important. This will help us to explain to people that don't do this as a profession.
Yeah.
Why they need a professional to work with that.
That's a good, one of the things that we're always looking for is value, right? What is the value we're presenting to our clients? And I think a lot of times from a compliance brokerage standpoint, we try to put our value in the wrong areas. Mainly because of a liability issue, not to get all nerdy on you, but 9 times out of 10, when we get in trouble, it ends up being in an area that we were trying to provide value. And a lot of times we do that because we're not providing value elsewhere. And I love what Jan said, is this gives us an opportunity to provide value at a really high level from our expertise. Okay, what else? What else would you say about the market?
New talking points.
Say that again?
So there's new.
New talking points, okay?
So if you think about the sound bites and the new tariffs. And for the most part, I don't think folks have a full understanding of what they are, what it means, if it affects housing. Inflation, housing involvement, and again, interest rates are still there. And so folks are inundated with these kind of buzzwords that are causing them to stall. And it further reiterates the fact or the point that if we're not in conversation with our folks on a frequent basis, they're gonna take these sound bites and we live in fear, they'll have a lacking mindset because they are being provided with the information they need to do the best decision.
Yeah, so what Delisha was saying is she's basically saying there's new talking points, there's new information, there are things that are coming out. And I'll summarize it, correct me if I need to add anything to it, but basically at the end of the day is we need to be able to provide the information that gets us to stop listening to things that are probably bringing in negative information. Now, not necessarily, I mean, one of the examples she gave was tariffs. It's not to say we can't talk about that or we don't talk about that. Yet when we look at what we have control over, let's talk about what we're experts in, so we can provide the information for the clients to make the best decision.
And also, we're paid as real estate agents, you've heard me say this a million times, we're paid for knowledge, advice, and service. Knowledge is relatively accessible in this day and age. We all have these things sitting in front of us, those telephones in our pocket, right? We can get info. What we can't do is sometimes understand it or articulate it or understand how it impacts the decisions that I'm making on a daily basis to get what I want in the future. And that's our job, right? As a real estate agent. So understanding not in depth how a tariff impacts real estate or any of the other political pieces to the puzzle, right? Being able to, at a bare minimum, understand them and then help advise our clients based on their needs, their wants, and what's currently going on. That's why we need to know this stuff. Because knowledge is, those are the 3 things we're getting paid for. If knowledge is already accessible, that means now we're only getting paid for 2 out of the 3, which does create a question around commission compression, right? Or pay. So we have to compensate for that by being more knowledgeable in the advice space, taking that knowledge and then understanding it so that we can give advice. Does that make sense as a fiduciary? So it is important to understand these numbers, the stories that it's telling, what's going to do it. Does anybody have a crystal ball in here? All right, so me neither. What?
I always misunderstand.
Well, you misunderstand most things. But yet nobody has a crystal ball. We can understand currently the situation, the knowledge that we have, the information, we can appreciate it for what it is, but then we can make fiduciary decisions based on what they want into the future, based on what we have today. Right, and that's why knowing all these numbers is very important, so Alicia made a good point. Yeah.
One of the things you brought up in the mastermind though was, we were saying people were feeling a lot of stress these days and stuff. It's always been, right? It's just, there's gonna be something, it's not like we live in a perfect world and there's never been any stress. So that stress is still there, but that knowledge gives us a power. We talked about using that knowledge, listening to the client and applying that empathy to help them get where they want to be. But there's always stress.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jack. We were having this conversation, which basically we're talking about the fear and anxiety that's currently in the market. Yet, as you step back and you look at that, you realize that there is always fear and anxiety. It's just getting created by something different. For buyers in the past, it was, I'm going to miss out, right? Now it's, for buyers right now, what is it? I'm gonna overpay. It's the same feeling. It's the exact same, it's fear and anxiety. It's just created by something else. So we have to step back and appreciate what are the challenges right now based on what's creating those feelings, and then solve for them. Right? So, because it's always going to exist, fear and anxiety, and that's good. Like that is what it is. So we just have to find the catalyst, and that's our job. Using all these numbers, using the story, and then using that story to help them feel good and get what they want. Solve that problem, make them feel good, and just selling. That's what our job is as sales. Yep. So, did you have something?
I kind of lost train of thought on what I was gonna say. But probably- I was thinking about how right now, I don't know how it is for everybody else, but I felt like I had a lot of buyers and everybody's kind of, on the fence or experiencing stressful situations, whether it be help out of nowhere or just kind of life in general. And the one thing that I keep kind of thinking during this process is that nothing is really happening either, because the areas they're looking are still the random hyper local spots and random parts not pleasant where the price is really still from under contract quickly, or it's a unique house in a great location. Or they just decided to take a step back. But I think what a lot of people need right now in general is being checked on. And I think that's something that, like, even with your friends and family, but I've reached out to a lot of like past clients that are in no way interested in buying anytime soon or selling. But they seem very touched by the fact that anybody's reaching out. And I think we all get so caught up on being stressed out and the anxiety needs to be fair. And there are a lot of things that we can't control, but what we can control is how we act towards other people. And I think right now, sometimes the value that isn't being done by AI and isn't being done by, numbers is checking in and just seeing how people are doing. And I think that goes along with what I'm later on being top of mind. Especially because you find out things about their lives that are good, so there's some exciting stuff on fiction. And also, I think having these numbers is so important to the conversations. Like some people, no matter what, are still gonna think what they're gonna think, unless it makes absolute sense for them at the time, or randomly they hear you and they never think about it. It might prompt something that would be the business that you were gonna have otherwise. Obviously, I think it's important for us to explain to people that like the market is not a bad market right now. It's still a great time, especially with buyers and sellers, but it's still sell right now as well. Like life goes on. We don't see anything horrible happening. I think it's just kind of everything else in the world that's
Yeah.
going on, and sometimes people
Yep. Love that.
Look, great points.
Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, there's three questions that we're always answering, right? But for in sales or in life in general, can you care? Can I trust you? And can you help me? Right? And by simply starting with that first question, you care, do they care? That's it. Hey, Cindy, how you doing? Right? And sometimes we miss that because we get so focused on the stresses of our own life or the challenges of now business right now. But now business was cultivated now business is just a numbers. Right? So, and that's constrained by time. But later business, right? That's not. That can be infinite. The more conversations about how you're doing and cultivating a relationship, that's what creates the now business in a scalable, sustainable way as compared to transactional way. So you hit it right on.
a lot of people right now, like, one of our jobs, or to look at what people need, regardless of whether it be real estate wise or anything, like, in order to connect with people, whether they need what we bring them value in. I think we underestimate how much little interactions or, hey, I'm just thinking about you, or, ask just something completely random. I mean, you think about when somebody does that to you, how nice that is, especially when it's not something like, hey, just check it out, but like maybe ask a
Yeah.
specific question or something that you remembered. It goes a long way be plays in my.
And I think that's, as we move into these numbers, I think what you discover in these discussions is there's two worlds that we're looking at right now. There's the reality of the market and where the opportunity is, and then there's the reality of our current situation. Right? So if we're in a situation, which most of us have been in at some point in time, where our buyers are taking longer, our sellers are sitting longer, what we do know and what these numbers are going to tell us is that there are buyers that are buying and there are sellers that are selling. There will always be that number. So you've got this, that's that whole working on the business versus in the business, right? We're going to be working in the business today on how to be the best of this information, also understanding that the on the business is then going and finding the people that apply to these numbers. So what the format of today, basically, I want to do a couple of company updates quickly, and then we're going to go into it and we're going to dissect what happened in Q1. We're going to do some comparisons of how that was from Q1 last year. That's going to be the main comparison because that's going to be the most relevant. And we're going to kind of jump back to what we covered last quarter for Q4 on there. But let's jump into that. One thing I do want to do is because we are trying to do better, as I'm trying to do better as an organization of telling the right story and celebrating what is going well.
Even the right story, the story.
The story, sorry, it's the story. We're not really celebrating, we're not really telling a story.
Yeah, right.
Well, Yeah,
Here's
yeah,
the story.
yeah, here's the story. And one of the things that we're seeing too is we're looking at this from an agent standpoint, from real estate market standpoint, and a brokerage standpoint. And one of the things that I do want to recognize, again, I'm pretty high on our leadership team right now, is we as a business look at our gross numbers and our net numbers just like you guys do as an agent. And we have our quarterly numbers too that I wanted to celebrate really quickly. So the first thing I want to put up here is the quarterly numbers for gross. There we go. So this is gross recruiting numbers. Obviously, we are looking at leading indicators, not only indicators, right? So when we look at recruiting, it's just like lead generating when you're in. And what I love about this is both of our market centers are in the top 10 for the quarter, for the first quarter on the number of people that have joined the organization, which is great. So we've got West Ashley, which includes Somerville as well, and then Mount Pleasant. So we got number 3 and number 8. That's great. That's a leading indicator. And the rest of the story, the next one is the one that I'm super, super proud of, is who's staying. This is net recruiting. This is a retention thing, because just like your business, if you're bringing in 100 leads and only converting 1, there's an issue, right? But in this case, we're number 1 in the region in retention in West Ashley, and we're number 5 in Mount Pleasant. That's huge. And that's from a lot of work from not only the leadership team, but also they want to be in business with you. People join the organization, have joined the organization because of these rooms. Ronnie made a great point in her acceptance speech last night. She said, I've always looked to put myself in rooms where there are people that are smarter than I am. And this room is that. She was talking about last night. This room is that. People want to be in rooms that are smarter than them. And the only way we can do that with as much training as we have, the only way that we can continue to do that is to bring more people into the room. Right? So I just want to say that because this is an awesome feat for the organization. Because by the way, this is not happening across the board. Right? People are moving. We've seen it. I get calls all the time. So-and-so moved. Yeah, they've moved. This is happening across the board. We've got to be aware of that, adjust, and move forward. And that's what the team has done. And so thank you guys for that, because it's you guys are the ones who are in the market. Our reputation's y'all, right? So when people have these conversations, this is what happens from it.
And the reason that these matter is because for us as a leadership team or a brokerage, the value isn't the value is not the leadership. Value isn't us. The value is all of you, right? There's 400 and some amazing minds. That's the value, right? We just kind of we're holding your coattails. Right? And when you look at these particular numbers, there's this pursuit in my head, right? Of what has to be true in order to build a place where nobody has to leave or wants to leave? What does that look like? What would that world look like? What would it feel like? I think that would be pretty damn cool, excuse me, right? And these numbers to me show the progress toward that. Will we ever be there? No. I kind of like that, right? Gives you something to shoot for. And at the same time, the progress is something to celebrate. Because one of the things that we don't do well is celebrate the progress. I mean, both of us can put our heads down for, well, I guess 6 years and not really look up and just continue to one brick at a time, one foot in front of the other. And to sit back and even looking last night to sit back, or I remember sitting at the our awards ceremony, but also just the Christmas party. Like I remember years ago, it was maybe 30 people. I think there was a couple hundred, right? To just stand in the corner and look at it is pretty unbelievable. What this group of people and what this organization, you being the organization, is able to do on a daily basis, and the people that it serves. I mean, there were almost 3,000 people that were served by our agents. From a unit perspective, it's a really cool story that kind of makes your heart feel good.
Yeah.
So that's why this story is one that we'll continue to talk about.
Yeah. Speaking of heart, I did throw this in here. So May is KDB Cares Month. We're gonna hear more about that. Red Day. Please be on the lookout for all the information on Red Day. Red Day is 2 weeks from yesterday. Is that, you say things like that, right? May 8th is Red Day. It's a Thursday. We're doing a food drive, blessing boxes. There's been information sent out. I'm thankful for the leadership team, the ALC, of putting that together. That's the heart of a lot of this. That's the heart of what brings us together. So be on the lookout for that. So here's how this shows up. So let's get into markets. This isn't in your slides yet. This is just a couple things. So this is just market share of closed transactions. Again, just to kind of see where this shows up. So what this slide is telling us is right now we're clearly in second spot with about 8% of market share. And we are creeping up on that, a number of units closed. The good news is that's coming from both sides. We always talk about this. If we, if you look at the numbers of the West Ashley office specifically in 2020 to 2021, our market share growth was massive. And once we started to look at the numbers of the agent's actual growth, it did not compare to the company's growth. Why? If the company's growing massively, but the agents aren't necessarily growing massively, what does that tell you is happening? Kind of, I know where you're going with that. You're bringing in agents, that's increasing your volume. Do we have opportunity for the agents that are there to increase the volume? And that's something when we took a look at, we're like, hey, we need to make sure that it's both on this. And so what's great about this is where our growth numbers have been good so far this year, these numbers aren't showing up from that yet. These numbers are showing up from the production and the work that the agents were already doing. So it's good to see that it's a balance now. We're not just trying to mask it with growth over here. It's both sides, both internally, growth is going up as well as bringing people in.
And to that point, as everybody, we use filtering questions, right? There's a great story about, I think it was a Harvard rowing team or something along those lines. They used to ask a simple, who was it?
Loud.
Wow.
Speak loud.
Oh, speak loud. I've never been told that. So I think it was Harvard, or I don't remember who it was, what rowing team. But what they did was they always asked, does it make the boat go fast? Was it Harvard's rowing team? Does it make the boat go fast? That's what is going to help them determine the activity and the choices they make today, present. For us as a leadership team, one of the very first questions we always ask is, does that help serve the agent to serve consumers at a higher level? We ask two other questions for that. We ask, does it increase internal agent production? And does it increase agent count? If it doesn't do those two things, obviously the first is it right for the agent? That's the prerequisite. That's the assumption, right? Yet, does it increase internal agent production? Does it increase agent count? And the reason those things matter is because market share matters, but also we're here to make money and serve people, right? Compensation is a byproduct of the value we give this world. And we want to help give value so that you can give more value and earn compensation, right? That's the game, right? So when we look at those two filtering questions, and in 2020, we went back, we realized one may not have been getting hit. Yeah, we were increasing agent count back then, yet what could we do and change and adapt so that we can do better at pulling that increased internal agent production number up? Now, this is a constant battle back and forth, right? This isn't ever going to be yes to both or no to, well, maybe it'll be no to both, but it always changes. But as business owners, as leaders, you have to continue to track and adapt based on the filtering question that is going to get you to your goal over time.
All right, so let's jump into the report. So the information you have in front of you, that's where we're starting in now. So the slides you have moving forward start on what's on the screen here. And you'll get sent all of these digitally. You will get two versions of it. You'll get a PDF version as well as a PowerPoint version, so you can customize them, everything here. Now, this is just for our use. I mean, with the story of this, just as a quick reminder, is this is taking information. We've hired a statistician to go in and basically rip all the data from the MLS and do custom reports on this. And we'll explain kind of how it's different from the MLS reports as we get there. But this is for you to use, brand as you want. I know a lot of you did. I mean, Shaquem, I think you had great success with it. I know that Alan and you guys on your team have done a great job with it. And we want to hear how you're using it. We want to hear more on best practices from it. So I'm going to walk through both, obviously with the information and then the usability of the information that you'll get. So the first slide is what we kind of goes through some disclaimers of the terms of use. There are some great conversations to have in here, right? Some ways to translate to your client, hey, this is why we're talking about this. This is the importance of this information. What you'll notice in the PowerPoint presentation is there actually in the notes section will be specific notes of what to say here or how to really narrow that down with your client, because there's a reason behind this. This isn't just to throw that out there. And the thing is, and I think Cynthia may have said it, is when you're getting this information, you have to make sure they understand why they're getting the information. Now, whether or not they use it or believe it is a different story, yet you still want to be able to provide that to them. So yes, that's what these pages are, the client dialogue, quarterly reports, data notes. Jump to, can't see what page number it is because it says talking by Joseph. Did you do page 5? So this kind of would set the stage of the conversation that you have. And the purpose of this is on page 5, it talks about, you've got a macro view, which are the national statistics that we really normally only cover on a yearly, bi-yearly basis. We'll be at Mega Leadership Camp. They'll probably give us some updates there that we'll go over, but really probably won't do another yearly one till probably the end of the summer, because most of those trends aren't seeing drastic changes, but that's the macro level. Today's the metro level. Today is what we're doing quarterly. We're entertaining how we can do this on a monthly basis, depending on how detailed we want to get it. But the purpose of today is what's happening on the metro level. This gives you basically the direction to then say, once you get to a micro level, so if you're having all these conversations, then how does this translate down to the micro level? So this is broken down. It is a live document. So if you are doing this digitally in front of your clients, these are all hyperlinked to the different sections. And then at any time, you can always click at the bottom of the document. So if you're in it with your client, click at the bottom of the document, it'll jump back up to the table of contents. So you can jump from place to place on there. Make sense? All right. So this one we went through, this is market share. Now this one is single family detached. You'll actually get I said you'll get 2 documents. You'll technically get 4. One will be for detached, one will be for attached condos. We're actually looking at just combining. We wanted to do them separately for 2 quarters to see if there's really a drastic difference in the two. There's really not as far as what the trends are doing. So we're probably going to have the next report just do all of those, but then separate in other ways. Keep separating in price point, possibly separating in sections to have that happen. All right, so let's go to the first page. This first one of the quick stats. Let's spend some time here. Cumulative monthly sales, top left. So this is kind of what's trending. This is what's been happening. What do you see here when you look at it? And I know that what's printed out is small. We wanted to make sure you had it though to start taking notes on it. Right, next time we do the whole page if you want. But what are you seeing here as a trend on cumulative monthly sales?
Sales are down, but the price is up.
Okay, sales are down, price is up. So again, keep in mind, this time frame is the quarter. So this is when it says year to date, which would be Q1. It'd be Q1 this year versus Q1 last year.
What are some of the things that tells you?
So go to that question first. So the question was, is to Sarah's point, where sales are down, but prices are up. What does that tell me? Still opportunity, is that what you said?
Appreciating, I heard appreciate.
Okay, appreciation. What else?
Prices are still going up.
For me, I don't know if this is accurate, but as predominantly buyers agent, honestly, I've seen a lot of still really priced homes compared to the comps. And because of the inventory, I think some of the other buyers agents are allowing their clients to do that much. That concerns me a little bit in this market, that skill issue is coming into play. And I think people are paying what the comps aren't supporting. Appraisals aren't totally correcting it, so it does come down to skill.
That's right.
Good. What else?
I think fallout from the COVID related places.
So fallout from COVID.
Yeah, people were over putting at that point, and now sellers are anticipating to increase, because a lot of these people are trying to. come back.
Yeah. Yeah, so just a quick bullet point on that one is you had a lot of buyers that felt the same way that Lynn was just saying, they overpaid back when COVID hit. I mean, they were just firing offers in. Not only were they overpaying, they were not doing any terms. And now all of a sudden they're trying to recover from it. And unfortunately, and the challenge that I see with this is you're looking at overall trends, right? So to Sarah's point, you got the median sales price, which is up 4.5%. The challenge that you're seeing though is a lot of these people that this, by the way, is quarter over quarter. There still may be areas where people are looking at what it was sold in their specific micro part of their neighborhood, where they may think they're losing money because their neighbor got a little bit more. Does that mean the overall trend is going down? No, but there could be a short term difference.
Also, if you zoom out a little bit, so look at the nation as a whole, what everything's doing in all the different markets. You're gonna have a lot of demographics that are going down, right? We're not seeing that because we're seeing a large migration in from a lot of different higher priced markets. So people are selling a decent amount of equity and they're moving in. So like Somerville, for example, for every one person we lose, we're gaining 3.74 people, right? So that's a massive influx. We also have a huge industry growth going on right now in the Charleston area that's not really being seen proportionally throughout the nation. So because all those people are coming in with all that money, we're seeing our prices continue to appreciate, whereas places like Dallas, Seattle, Washington DC, Massachusetts, New York City, all those places are seeing depression. And we're insulated from that, mostly because of our industry growth and also our cost of living.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we're always gonna, I mean, we have for as long as I've been in this market. Which is a long time, I could be sure. So is that we've got the economic growth and the livability like desire here that, I mean, honestly, you could put up against any part of the nation. So that's gonna create part of that as well, which would then therefore supply and demand, whether or not the trend of how many homes are selling, there's still the demand for them, so it's gonna drive them up.
To kind of tie into that, I just heard Mayor Coxwell speak. And he said in the last 7 years, our median income, I think it was median, has doubled. So our income in Charleston is now 2 times what it was 7 years ago. And that's what, like, it's not that we're all making twice what we were before, it's that people are moving here and having a lot of money. Like that, just a lot of rich people are moving here.
That's an interesting discussion, because when you hear, that's very interesting, as you hear that snapshot of in the last 7 years, the median income has doubled. That doesn't necessarily mean industry pay has doubled locally. It means the people that are moving here, because you do have a lot of people that are moving here, either bringing the industry that they're doing or they're working remotely.
Ben, do you have something?
Yeah, the really monthly sales is, that should be encouraging everybody. The only real rip off we plan for the past 3 years. We went interest rates skyrocketed in September. We also oh crap, we're screwed. And now we're back on the trend line and still fine. 1.5% is not enough for India, like it feels for. I get that. Yes, we're sitting on the market is by savvy, and there is more product instead. But they're still buying. The price right on the contract. The number of sales falling that line only dip off about September.
Well, what you're, to me, if I go back to, so a couple pages earlier, it says, price and condition account for 80% of buyer interest and acceptance for any property. And when I look at this, I see that buyers are becoming more reluctant at the current price. There's still demand, but thank you. That's great.
Other people who are buyers agents in the state, and they're kind of saying the same thing, that they're not putting up with sellers' demands essentially, and that they're just gonna go look for a different house.
That's right. It's a normalization. That's all. We're starting to see that, like, we could do this 2-3 years ago and you'd see like a 19% appreciation, right? Not sustainable, not normal. What's the historical appreciation in real estate? 4%. Thank you. So, and what are we at? 4.5, right? And what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a reduction or a normalization then in demand, in buyer demand. We're starting to see where buyers say, hey, that's a little too much. Hey, that doesn't make no sense. And that's good. Like that's okay. there was, in the past, there's this big narrative around everything is going to heck in a handbasket. No, it's normalized and it's still a seller's market, right? So we're just seeing that normalization, Dutch.
So how do you tell that story when you have buyers who are seeing sales are down, but prices are up? Why don't I continue to wait if sales are going down, as far as prices are concerned?
That is fascinating, and economics 101, right, which has also been violated over the last 3 years when you look at interest rates and price. Typically, when interest rates go up, what happens to price? It goes down. What happens to price when interest rates go up? Price goes down, right? And supposed to. But over the last 3 years, have we seen that? It's been one of the goofiest violations. I want to
Have
go
we
back
ever
to my.
seen that? I mean, I think there's also a much simpler, just go to the last 25 years trends of real estate, right? Most buyers, for the most part, are not buying a house to be in it for 6 months. So when the buyer comes up to that, the question was, what happens when buyers are looking at it and say, well, the number of sales are going down? That would just say eventually values are gonna go down. That's never sustained for a period of time of more than 2 to 3 years in the history of ever.
No.
Right? So it's now, you can't say that to them that way, right? But it's like, but it's, well, it's scheme again. Yeah, it's scheme again. Right? I can't. Yet I mean, that's part of our, it's to educate them. And again, as we get more and more into these stats, you know, the whole message is, listen, I'm here to give you the most accurate information I have for you to make the best decision. If after seeing all of this, you don't feel it's the right thing, I mean, at some point, this goes back to in the business versus on the business. Is that a buyer lead that's now no longer ready, willing, and able? And that's a decision that we have to make. But I think it's going to the numbers and then understanding if they make that decision, they make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, you have to say, I said this recently, like, I feel like this whole, like, people moving in from the other areas, that's huge to like, keep in mind, because like locals are like, Charleston lost its mind, and people from other regions are like, this is cheap, right? So that's where that whole, like, people are buying against prices, unless I would advise the buyer to pay, if someone else is saying, hey, this is nothing what I would pay to Connecticut or Massachusetts. And then the second part is when those buyers are saying, I just can't believe I have to do this, and the interest rates, the story, the message is, there's 2 options. You have to either make peace with it, or like if you need to buy now, you have to make peace with this reality. And how do I help you make peace with what you have to do? Or you don't buy right now. Not necessarily like it's gonna get so much better, but if at the end of the day, you can't make peace with it, then I can't advise you to make an offer. Thus, you need to have peace and no buyer's regret. So you have to ask them, when are you gonna make peace with this? Because it's not changing, right? Be able to give them that. People, we think it's crazy. Other people from other regions are like, this isn't that expensive. So we're in a real tough spot, I think, as old school Charleston real estate agents, because we remember when as well, but it's not about us, right?
Yeah. You
can't bring your story in. It's about the client and getting off of your thing and saying, how can I help you make the use to make that offer?
So what about this bottom left one, the median percentage of original list price? This is kind of some of the things that we're thinking now, is like, what's happening? So we saw the median percentage of original list price go to 97%, so it's down half a point from last year. What that's saying is that on average, people are on median when they're getting 97.4% of their original list price. What's that telling you? Say that again? Yeah, I think this goes back to almost exactly what you said. A lot of these sellers just jumped on thinking they're still riding the wave up. Now, does that mean, but here's what's interesting. This is why it's so important to look at what are the 2 different stories top right graph tells you versus bottom left graph tells you. As a consumer. So if I'm a consumer and I hear the stat on the bottom left that says the median list price to sales price has gone down whatever much, what are you hearing?
Prices are dropping.
Prices are going down. What is the reality?
Prices are going
They're
up.
not. And if we don't, this goes back to what Delisha started with, if we don't start to stop listening to the again, it's not negative, it's just what it is. If we don't stop listening to how it's being improperly translated, that's where the sellers are gonna live. They say, well, prices are going down. There's no area, with the exception of a few micro markets in a short period of time, where that's a reality. We just have to be able to tell them that. Median days on market. Bottom right, 42 is the median days on market. For Q1, that's up 17 days from last year. How's that make you feel?
How's that make your consumer feel? Your seller? So,
It's a 50% increase in time, like, here's where my mind goes, it's 17 days, big deal, come on, it's 2 weeks, what are you talking about? 2 weeks will fly by. It's a 50% increase in what happened last year. It's a 50% increase from what their neighbor told them at the cocktail party happened when they sold the house last year. It's a perspective thing.
and what's the, oh, go ahead.
Well, and with that graph, you can easily get rid of that anxiety for having a conversation with them. Because they're anxious because we went in and said, I'm sorry, we said. Because we've had been saying that for the past 4 years. And then when the 17th day, you know, the 21st day comes, they're like, wait a second, you said that you're gonna sell in 14 days, my house is not gonna sell, I got fired. But on with this graph, you can go and say, here's what the market's telling us. And also,
What I love about what he just said is one of the big discussions, so the masterminds on Wednesday was between 5 and 10 million. Well, the first one was the agents between 5 and 10 million one. And the big conversation with that group was making sure we're setting the expectations early on. And if you go in with this to say, here's where we are now, it's not good, better, and different, you've already set them up. By the way, this is why this report flows the way that it does, because in about 4 or 5 slides, don't do it. You're gonna see actually how that story can be very different if you hire the right person. Right? And that's an important part of the message.
Well, and again, we can keep going back to this fear and anxiety thing, yet. When I was looking at this, I asked Joseph, I said, well, in Q4, what were the median days on market for Q4 in 2024? So we know that in Q1 of 2024, it was 25 days on market, right? In Q4 of 2024, it was something like 25 days, something around those lines, right? How many mortgage payments is that? 1. How many mortgage payments is 42 days?
2.
About 2, right? And then we'll probably talk about in a few slides, how that could even increase to 3 or 4, right? Based on price. Does that create more stress? Of course it does, right? So having these conversations on the front end and backed by data, not emotion, this is simply logic. Right? This is what we can expect from a probability standpoint. We can appreciate then where they are, and then our dialogue with them can be more compassionate and explain how we're going to solve this problem. Does that make sense? Because even in 3 months, we saw an increase of 1 month's payment based on how long that house is going to sit. That's stressful. That can be 3, 4, 5, 10 grand for somebody. Maybe that hurts. Maybe they have to sell because they no longer can afford the particular lifestyle. Is that extra month gonna matter? Heck yeah, right? So this data, we can also appreciate where people are potentially from a fear and anxiety standpoint to help insulate.
Yeah. So let's just keep digging down at these. So going to the next page. So number of homes sold. So this is what we just talked about, right? It's all the way on the right-hand side. Saw the small dip there, down 1.5%. And then it breaks it down by price. Obviously, this will be helpful as you start talking to specific sellers in this, but when you look at this, what do you see?
Is it down enough to show how much?
Say that again?
Like, is our inventory different because prices have changed too much, like, is it the under 200, is that what that's at? Is it?
Under 250?
You don't have that much.
Yeah, so and we started to see that, and it broke it out even more this time because there were more there. But if you look in the lower price points, those are arguably going down because they're pricing out. Not because necessarily they're not selling, it's they've priced up into the next price.
Well, there's some of them hottest on them.
Right, and as you'll see, when we go to the actual days on market by price point, you'll see the same thing apply. Right, they're selling faster, and fewer of them are because what's happening is values are driving them up into the next bracket. Yeah. Anything else on this?
Why do we pick 300 to 300?
It's based on balancing it out with the data, to have it spread out what the equation is. We can explore doing different versions, like,
At 350 rate, that's like a huge rate.
okay. Yeah, we can look into how, and that's what we're looking at is exploring, now that we've gone through two of this, is do we look at doing these differently? And I think there's a way that we can possibly get it where it's interactive per slide. Right. Okay, let's get it in. Yes,
So for price points that are 650, obviously the number of sold that is all gone up. Are we also saying that that's due to values? I mean, things have gone, or is that just that those are more attractive properties? Since they're what they're playing and that's what's selling right now.
so the question was, is that due to values going up, or are those more attractive properties that are selling right now? What would y'all say? I mean, I'll go to y'all are in the field.
I think that goes back to our income discussion we just had. Whereas the normal person living here in Charleston their entire life hasn't necessarily seen that huge wage increase. But we see a lot more high paying jobs coming into the area.
Yeah.
And that's how we doubled in 7 years, isn't because people are making more money. I mean, they are, but probably 40% in the last 7 years, not 200%.
Right.
So we have a lot more high paying jobs.
Yeah, and those higher income,
Yeah.
yeah, and those higher income people are more insulated.
Yeah, so we'll go back to the points, insulated from interest rates, when you're at that income, you're not as concerned about them. At least
Cash buyers.
cash buyers that are coming in that, okay?
Is it also, I mean, and this is just out of curiosity, but like typically what you've got for that price range. It's obviously offering something significant as well, so like it's either gonna be in a great location or it's going to be. You know, well priced, I'm not well priced, very well appointed, decorated, et cetera, or it's like. You know, really, you know, has some sort of very like deep water dock or some sort of feature that I just wonder. Why those go up, you know, you see again, all of the news is like the luxury market, et cetera. But
Well,
I feel like here it's doing well.
Well, and I think that's another discussion I'd love to, we could probably do another mastermind on that, is like, luxury market in Charleston is not, when people say luxury market, we're talking high net worth. We've got a lot of luxury market in Charleston that, again, this goes back to what we've been talking about, it's like, I look at it as like, oh my gosh, that's luxury, because I've lived here for 25, 30 years. But people that are moving here, they're like, I just moved, you know, where you said $35 million house, it's nothing, right? And so it's like looking at that. So I think when you're here in the luxury market, you're almost talking about almost like a micro market of that. Yes.
Well, also with the markets, if you look at it, if you think about stocks and people investing and looking at their 401k, people that can afford 400,000, the first quarter lost about 25 to 30% of their 401k balance. So they're looking at that and then they're saying, what, house prices are going up, but the stock market's going down. Wow. How do you explain that? And if you look at the ones going up, those are a long time. People that have been invested for years, they're still up on their investment and they can afford to do it. But the average person making $80,000 to $100,000 a year just lost 30% of their retirement, 30% of their investment. Now they're looking at spending whatever, 4, 5, 6% more houses.
Yeah, I mean, that's
How do you think that?
That's a great point. It's similar to the point that Sean made, is that those people are more insulated from what the market may necessarily be doing.
Actually, also have to make the flip as far as the new generation. I mean, I'm born and raised in Charleston, so that's my sphere. But that's like a flip for me, and I have to do more relocation concert. Because unfortunately, there are people in my sphere who necessarily do what I do.
Yeah.
We also have to use that for.
And to that point too, but what mitigates that risk? It's time. So, what's the average person stays in a house for how long? 10 years? It's still around 10, right? It's been pushed down, it's like 7 to 10, between 7 and 10, right? That's what mitigates the risk of being underwater. It's also what mitigates the risk of losing my 401k. And it is this reason right here. I looked up the other day and it said, what's the average amount of money in a 401k? Right? And it was somewhere between, like, obviously the different price points. It wasn't above like 300 grand. And what is the average price of a home in Charleston? It's more it's more than in a 401k, which tells me that most people, their largest asset is the home that they're living in. Why don't we, as fiduciaries and real estate consultants, appreciate that? Give a call to Jan and say, hey, it's that time again. Let's review your asset, the largest asset that you have, or one of the largest assets that you have. And let's see where everything is. Let's do a CMA. Let's appreciate how much equity is in this home, because 75% of individuals, of homeowners, have more than 50% of equity in their home. Is that something that could potentially mitigate the risk of their 30% drop short term in the stock market? Say yes.
Yes.
100%. But how do we have that conversation without having that conversation? We don't. We reach out to our database, we have quarterly reviews or 6-month reviews. As a real estate consultant, does that elevate the perception of your value from your client or to your client outside of Jan, go open that door for me? 100%. Will they call you? Yeah. Hey, I saw this on Housing Wire or Inman or whatever, or just the news. Can you tell me about it? I know we had that conversation a couple weeks ago, but it looks like things have changed. What do you think, Jan? That's where the sustainability comes from. It's having those conversations. So great point. I started thinking on that. It's good.
So month supply. So this one's always one, I mean, it's a snapshot of it's a result, I should say, of what we just saw, right? I mean, it's homes that are coming on the market versus homes that are selling. Relatively speaking, is this a good market or a bad market? It's a pretty normal market. It's a pretty strong market. I have a client that's in, a coaching client that's in southeast Florida, and they've got some of theirs. I mean, one of them, we're at 6.4 here. That's our worst market. They've got one of their price points is at 18 months.
Oh.
Yeah. Again, the same thing applies. They also don't have people moving in droves to southeast Florida right now. So that's part of the cause that's there. So when you're looking at it from a perspective standpoint, this goes back to the discussion before, what's the reality of the market and then what's the reality of our business? Right? And the reality of the market is it's there. There's a market to be had. Anyone add?
It's a normalization.
Yeah.
Normalization is not bad.
Yeah.
It is, right?
So just looking at these numbers, the previous one, a lot of what we're seeing is in that lower range. I understand that, but these are also your first time homeowners. These are people who could benefit from banking programs that are specified for, like the Dreamers program that we talked about the other day. They're specified for like teachers and police officers and people that are in that middle to lower income. And I'm just looking at it thinking now, well, why can't we reach out to more of these types of programs and try to convince first time homeowners that don't know about these programs, that they don't even think that they have a chance. That's probably another issue too. You have first time homeowners who are like really discouraged by the economy right now. So they're not trying to go out and figure out what to do.
That's right. And first and foremost, our responsibility is to bring logic into the equation, because there's a lot of emotion in the real estate transaction. Second, I think having the right partners. You're not a loan officer. You don't know mortgages as well as they should, right? You know real estate. So having the right partners in your corner with, hey, these are the programs that we can leverage to solve the problem of this subset of the population, of this subset of the population, of this subset of the population, and knowing that as an agent, but then saying, hey, Camille, I'm going to connect you with ABC loan officer, who's a great partner of mine, and he specifically or she specifically works with people in your particular situation. This is going to be awesome, because consumer experience is unique access, unique service, and unique insight. When you have when you can go real deep into those three categories for specific subsets in your database, the value that you provide is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
So to that point, that's how I would play that.
And here's what I want to encourage you to do, is what we're gonna do when we get through the slides, we'll grab lunch and we're gonna wrap up with a mastermind around it. And those are the types of thoughts that we need to have in that mastermind. It's not only what are we doing with this information with our current clients and situation, is what are we doing with this information to go find more clients, right? And that's a perfect example of like the strategy that's around it.
That's a MOFR. That's a make offer for immediate response. You have this particular issue, I have a solution.
Yeah. All right, jump to page 11. All right, percentage of original list price received by sellers. So now we're gonna start getting into what's just happening overall for all of the market. And we're gonna keep hammering down or zooming in into what happens in general, and then what happens when you list with a professional. See what I little scripted that up for you, right? That's right. All right, so percentage of original list price. We talked about the general one, 97.4%, down 0.5% since last year, right? So the amount you're getting for what you're asking is going down. Now, keep in mind, these stats on the previous, they do include homes that came off the market for more than 30 days, but came back out and closed, right? So I mean, this is original list price for homes that were listed prior. It came off and came back on, so just keep that in mind. So it's a very accurate number. Again, you're seeing this fairly consistent across the board. I'd be curious to get y'all's opinion though of why it does seem to be a little bit greater in the lower price points. Well, this one didn't go down too much, but 250 went, they're still greater than the rest. If there's fewer of those that are selling, why would you think that it is that they're taking less than the original list price?
Condition.
Okay. That kind of across the board, what everybody's thinking? Okay.
But that's also, you have to do a significant price drop to get something, right? So it's a very low price point. Any price drop is gonna look like a giant percentage.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. We'll
No,
make it.
specifically in those price
Yeah,
ranges.
yeah, yeah.
A $5,000 or $4,000 house, that's a 1%.
Right.
That's
I
right.
drop that on a 250 house, that's 2%.
There you
Great point.
go. That is a really good point. Pretty smart, Paul.
Love your shirt.
Exactly.
Be shy.
All right,
I like that duck.
days on market. So this is the one that's fascinating. So days on market, 42. 42, this one's a jump. This one's a jump. Up 17 days from last year, that's 68%. You feel that one? What?
Yeah, you do.
You do. Why specifically you think that's happening? Yeah,
Go ahead, Sean.
It's a function of inventory. It's just, we have more inventory on the market now, and if you follow the trend line, like we have more inventory on the market now than like since pre-pandemic. And so buyers have more choices, they have more things to choose from. And when you insert, and I think the telling, like, there's one other statistic that has to come with this, in my view, which is year to date cumulative sales. And we see it following the trend line, like negative down 1.5%, that's a negligible difference, especially when you consider snow again, and that might have pushed everybody's plans back 1 week. So the data set is probably like, we're following the trend line. So we have the same demand for the past 2 years, but now we have pretty much double the supply. And if you think back to basic economics and a supply and demand curve, if you shift the supply curve to the right and you keep the demand curve constant, well, what does that do with price? I think that you can see that in the data set, but you have so much more choice for the consumer. And so I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how this number changes over the next few quarters because of the supply increase. And if we do actually see some.
and I think what's important about that, to summarize, because if you don't get the numbers like Sean does, to summarize it though, basically just that, we have more homes available for just as many buyers. I mean, that's kind of the simplest way to put it, and why that's important for you to know that, Mr. Seller, is they have more choices, regardless of whether or not you want to admit it, they just do. That's what the numbers are telling us, which is, oh, by the way, why it's taking longer to sell. So you've got,
Back on the market?
yes. Yeah.
Okay, that also is happening a lot more, because I think if buyers are getting the contract and they feel it was a little overpriced. And they don't get what they want inside the inspection, they cut a lot
The
faster.
best things that happen to buyers in this market is the timing of due diligence coming out. We never saw an inflated due diligence fee like we did in North Carolina. Like in North Carolina, due diligence fees were $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. They were ridiculous. And you paid it up front. Like you wrote the check to say, please let me have a contract on your house. And luckily, the market was shifting when we came here, and what that's caused is you're still getting away with termination fees, where buyers are like, fine, let's just get under contract, because we know that we can, if we truly don't love it, we'll walk on a couple $100, maybe 1,000 or 2, and so you are seeing a lot more coming back to the market for that. All right, sorry.
Cynthia, go.
Just curious, how are you explaining, like, when you say, you know, we have the same amount of buyers for double the supply? What would you say to the people that say, no, there aren't as many buyers out there? I mean, you know, because at one point, or demand wise, I guess.
So you've got, because again, it goes back to cumulative sales.
Right, okay.
Well, we know it,
Like, back, that's,
yeah, that's a great question, right? And here's what we know, and this is why it's like the simplistic thing that we have in this entire equation is every single closing included two things. What were they? A buyer and seller. So you start there, right? And so when you're following that, now the supply of either one is what's changing.
Yeah, and price is gonna go up when there's more buyers willing to buy than sellers willing to sell, price will go up, right?
Right.
And vice versa, if there's more sellers willing to sell than buyers willing to buy, price will go down. It was at such a degree where there was such a lack of inventory for the demand of buyers that propelled price at an astronomical rate. Now what you're seeing is that there are still more buyers willing to buy than sellers willing to sell. It's just a smaller delta, which means that although units aren't going up, they're flat, price is still getting pushed because there are still more sellers willing to, there's still more buyers willing to buy than sellers willing to sell. It's just that delta was so big 3 years ago that it felt nuts, and that's why price was flying. Now it's just smaller, so we're seeing it at a historical norm, and that feels weird to us relative to what we just came from.
it's interesting too, because I personally feel like like there are less buyers, and as a buyer's agent, you know, and so that's interesting to see that, like, when you ask that question, it's like, well, we're just gonna go back to this chart about cumulative sales. I don't know where those buyers are coming from, really. I'm not gonna
But they're
say
here, right?
But they are here, they're
Yeah.
just not, they're still here at the same rate, it just, there's also more sellers, so the delta is small,
And the urgency is not as
Yeah.
much, probably,
because there are more choices.
right, right.
Because, like, go back, and I love this goofy,
I don't think that agents are feeling a sense of urgency in order to fully address the seller with their position, nor the buyer in their position.
Yeah.
The agent who is supposedly helping this person is not creating any sense of urgency. They're saying, oh, you know, there are more houses out there for you to choose from as far as a buyer goes. And with the seller, they're saying, oh, don't worry, we've got more buyers in the market. Where before, anybody that was in real estate a couple of years ago, you created that sense of urgency. Look, we don't know when we're gonna get another house like this on the market.
and I think that could be true as well, right? And I kind of think back to 2020 and the toilet paper thing. Right, I know this is such a stupid example, but appease me in that you would walk in and you bought whatever toilet paper you could get, right? That's exactly what happened to houses in 2020 and 2021. Everything, the inventory, the shelves cleared. And people needed to move, they needed a home to live in, so they bought
Whatever they could.
they bought something that maybe the condition wasn't what they wanted, or the price wasn't where they typically wanted. They also were worried about not getting one, right? So they hurried up, they grabbed whatever it was, whatever brand of toilet paper was sitting there. But what you're seeing now is the toilet paper got restocked. Right, so now you're going to have this question around urgency, because, oh, I don't have to go today, I can go tomorrow because it's still gonna be there, right? Like the inventory has a big impact, because there's a smaller delta between demand and supply.
Well, oh, sorry.
Yeah, wait.
No, it's fine. I was just gonna piggyback on what Lynn said a couple slides ago, and I think a lot of it is buyer's exhaustion. You know, they're just not willing to pay the prices, and they're over the craziness. They see the market slowing down, and maybe they're thinking it's going to continue, but also they're saying, okay, if I'm still paying top dollar, it better be perfect.
Yep.
And it goes, you know, we see that in inspections, like you said too. If the sellers, if I'm gonna pay top dollar, even if I get a $2,000 discount, they better fix X, Y, and Z. And if they don't,
I'm gonna go find another house.
Yeah,
And even
And
if
that's-
it's not top dollar, they kind of want that.
well, yeah, well, and that's when we go into pricing, and this is good segue into it. I mean, it's still we're getting back to, I mean, it's a price war and a beauty pageant. I mean, that way. So it's like, it's conflicting because it's like you've got to hit those side levels. All right, so let's talk about,
Like, I'm also seeing people deciding to make a lot of repair, or sorry, they say, never mind, I'm just gonna fix what's in my house and make it what I want it to be. I'm actually not gonna do it. The challenge there is then 2 years later, they're trying to get that buyer to cover what they spent. That's what we're doing right now. It's trying to cover sellers' improvements that they did 2 and 3 years ago, which to me, I am always like, it's not my buyer's responsibility to cover your improvements.
Right.
It's no longer a profit.
yeah. All right, so let's go into price reduction. So this is an interesting one. So what this slide on page 13 is saying is we have basically an increase on the number of homes that did a price reduction. So 48% of the closings in Q1 had a price reduction, 48.4. That's up. Thank you, 40%, 48.4% of sales. So that's up a lot from last year, right? So we're seeing it, and we're seeing it consistent in all price points with the exception of 2 million. Right, so again, that's just going to show what we set up in this story. People are putting their home on the market, they're being a little too ambitious, and half of them are having to do a price reduction. Again, if you're a seller, you hear this story alone, what are you hearing? Not a good time to sell, I'm having to drop my price, prices are going down. This is, by the way, going back to kind of Jan's point of agents aren't creating some sort of urgency. You're doing a disservice if you're allowing a seller to just blanketly believe that. You're putting poor sellers on the market, meaning not good sellers on the market, because they're assuming that they're just gonna have to chase the market down. And you're giving buyers false hope that there's more opportunity for them because those sellers think that they're gonna get a higher price.
And for that, you would just go back 2 slides and say, no, they're overpriced. Yet price is still going up by 4.5% year over year. Q1 over Q1 2025 compared to Q1 2024, still going up. So that's actually not true, right? So, and it also tells me 50% of houses are overpriced.
At the end of the day, that's it.
At the end of the day, that's what this graph is telling me. I'm sorry, not 50%, 48.4%, right?
Yeah.
In my world, that's 50%, right?
Depending on-
Or most of them.
Right. So, all right. All right, so this is the reduction that's taken, like the percentage of reduction in each price point. So out of the 48% that took the price reduction, this is what it looked like. Roughly a 5% overall price reduction that was had to be taken in order to get a successful sale. I mean, that's, this could be big numbers in some of these price points people are taking on, so just have to keep that in mind. Shante.
Yeah, because if we think about it, if these ones are from the street from the MLS, and when we use the MLS to our homes, to get our pricing, and we're using that reference, and then we're coming up with, we think it's a good price, but that 50% is overpriced, and how we have that conversation with our seller that, hey, these are the homes that I have, and I need you to come $10,000 less because they're all overpriced.
Well, the comps that you're gonna be using are gonna be the ones that were successful sales.
Yes.
Right, so you'll start there, right? It's a great question, right? I mean, this is why we have it.
Sales are a helpful target too, so I like to pull it into that live cloud TMA. And you can see, okay, all of these houses that are outside of this code that actually sold, they're too high, that's why they never sold. So I like to use the Kansas and the side too, because that shows that's the price that it won't sell. Right.
Yeah, that shows your ceiling.
So there's 2 things that we take from this one. Number one, obviously just kind of awareness, but the other thing is if you are in a conversation with a seller and you haven't hit the average days on, or you've hit the average days on market and they haven't sold and you're considering a price reduction, you then have to go to this and say, based on our price point, in order to get a successful sale, this is what had to happen. So we had to go at least 3.8, I mean, this is on average what people had to do to get a successful sale. So it kind of goes back to, if you're in a $500,000 house, your price, your price at 525 or something like that, you do a $5,000 price reduction, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Buyers don't notice. you're looking at a four, almost a 4% reduction you have to do. So you can look at it as an indicator of what could be expected if you miss the mark. The other thing this tells us, I mean, if you just kind of look, going back to the trend a little bit, an increase in the amount of homes, or the increase, I should say, in the amount of they're having to reduce, could be, we'll see what happens over the next quarter. It could be an indication of just a little bit more of a difficult market for selling. Right, because you could start to say. This could be this for the long, so,
Because you're seeing a compression in the delta between supply and demand.
yeah. All right, so,
Somebody had their hand up.
oh, sorry, Paul.
And just one more thing to think about is, a lot of times you'll see like a 409 house get priced. And it sits, and it sits, and it sits, and then it drops to 399.9 and it's under contract. So sometimes it's just the bracketing, you have the wrong group of people looking at your house. That's right. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I think. Price bracketing is something that's fascinating to watch right now, because when I see a house that comes on the market and it's 409. I have a lot of judgment. I'm not proud of said judgment, but I'm just like, you're $9,000 away. From missing an entire group of buyers of seeing your house. Because no one searches up to 409.9, they search to 4. They search from 4 to 425. So the same argument can be made for 426. Right, or 425, like, again, this is where you take the market expertise to your marketing expertise of getting the exposure that you're there. And that's why, when people are like, well, I'm at 549, I'll go to 540, that doesn't change your bracket. There's not a buyer out there that caps their search at 540. So if you're doing a price reduction, you've got to look at the average, and then you've got to look at the effort to find a new buyer. Because if Paul's the buyer that's out there, saw it at 545, saw you go to 540, they're like, oh, I'm gonna wait this guy out. Right, I'm gonna see how long he keeps going. All right, so. Now the talk becomes, if we're talking to our sellers, I've priced here, I have to do a price reduction, and this is what happens. This next slide is fascinating, because this next slide is gonna help kind of talk about the conversation of, well, I wanna start here. Right, you'll get that, you'll explain all the information, the stats, and you say, I wanna start here. So this one's very interesting, because this is basically what happens. Basically what happens, if you have to do a price reduction, how that then impacts your sales price to original list price. Okay, because what we said earlier, who remembers from the first slide, what was the sales price to original list price of everyone?
94.4.
97.8, 97.4, I think it was. Okay. So here's what's interesting. If you
97.
price your home correctly. All of the homes, with the exception of one bracket and kind of two, every home that closed. In Q1, that was priced correctly, meaning they did not have to do a price reduction. Got 100% of list price to sale price. Think about that for a second. If you're priced correctly, you're getting your price. If you had to do a price reduction. You're now going down to 93% of your original list price. That's huge. This is why the story needs to be told on a more specific level, because someone would say, okay, well, if I don't price right, then I'm still gonna get 97.4%. Well, no, if you don't price right and you have to reduce, you're actually going down to 93%. This is a big risk. This is why we don't want to start with the whole, I'll start here. Because what the market is telling us is if you have to do a price reduction, you're drastically losing your leverage. You're drastically losing your leverage. Does that make sense?
And you may say to yourself, or your seller might say, well, then just price a little bit higher and we'll still get that price. No, because days on market now comes into play.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into days on market.
And I'm not allowed to move forward. in the slide.
Freaking cats up here. I know that.
Just one.
Spend an hour with it.
You would need it.
I have to say, I do believe we should pause and give him a round of applause because he's done a really good job with staying on the floor.
Thank you. I'm so terribly impatient.
If you see him over here, he's like, it's like,
Come on, let's move.
now, okay, so we've got that. So, but again, here's what's still gonna happen. That's fine. I'll price here. And then when I get to the real price, Jan, I tell you what, I'm not gonna go with your price yet. I'm gonna start here, but then when I go to your price, I'll get it. Here's what happens. The next slide is what's called, what we've done, the negotiation penalty. This is fascinating. So on page 16, this says when homes did get to the right price, so they had to do a price reduction. And then when they get to the price that's sold. Bam, that's it. No price reduction. Obviously, that's the same, 100%. When they got to the price that they sold, they actually then took 98.8% of the adjusted price. So it's not like when you get to the right price, you're getting 100%. That's fascinating. Oh, by the way, we haven't even talked about how much longer it takes you to sell by doing so.
Except under 500,
Except under 500.
right? So you can appreciate that, okay, except now that is probably because that's affordability, there's affordability into that equation. There's some variables that are probably impacting that piece.
Yeah.
Under 500.
Yeah, there's the demand there is probably higher in that price point,
Yeah.
because when they got to a price, people were like, bam.
Yeah, and so now they're saying this is, oh, I gotta get this house. However, as an average, right, total, 98.8%, it's 2%. 2% of 600 grand is a large number. 2% of 500 grand is a decent number, right? So, yeah, so it's something to think about.
Yeah. And again, this is just education again, because you'll get these, by the way, and as you have more and more of these seller conversations, which you need to be having, this is just data.
And that's on top of only getting 93% of the original list price too.
Well, that's what drives it, when you get to the price, because again, where their thought process goes, is saying, okay, that's great, but if I don't want to be at 500 yet, this is round number, if I want to be at 510, 520, whatever it is. So when I get to 500, I'll get 500. Because had I priced 500, like you said, I'd get 100%. Well, what this is saying is no.
You'll actually
If
get
you
2%.
get to the right price later, you'll actually get 1.5% less. And it's taken over, yes.
And it probably isn't like a huge factor in this, but a couple of the sales have also, because of the change in buyers, I'll offer you, it's priced at 500, we're gonna offer 515, and you're gonna give us 15 back.
We're gonna talk about concessions.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got those specific numbers in there, and it's a good point,
Okay.
right? It's a good point. Yeah, it's a great point.
We're not allowed to talk about that yet, but it's a great point. It also goes to a point that Cynthia made earlier.
Yeah, all right, so we've only talked about now what happens with the actual price when it relates to price reduction. This next slide, before you look, you've already looked, that's fine. Do we remember what the median days on market was for the homes that sold? On average, 42?
Yeah.
This next slide is baffling. If a home did not have to have a price reduction, which by the way, was 52% of the houses. 52% of the houses that sold in Q1 did not have to have a price reduction. Kristen, everybody. So 52% of these people that did not have to do a price reduction, on average, sold in 7 days. Exactly. Got a contract. Doesn't mean they close. Great clarification. Got a contract, right? Their days on market were 7 days. Which means if you have to do a price reduction, it could jump to 100. You've gone from 1 week, possibly 4 or 5 times of having to make the bed, clean the house, get the kids out, put everything away, sweep everything under everything. 1 week of that to 3 months of it. That's a difficult pill to swallow as a seller. Right? So not only do you have this, and by the way, this doesn't now factor in the reduction in price that you're getting. The costs that you have from that are actual hard, this is an actual hard cost, by the way. The other ones, the hard part about sales price to original list price is that wasn't a realized number anyway. Right? You can't really say you lost money on that because clearly you weren't gonna get it. Right, if you priced it in place. this is this is a hard cost. This is when you got to the right price. You have a hard cost from it. And then in addition to that, you have these carry costs. This delta here is fascinating.
This is a lot of money. This is again, back to fear and anxiety, like, this is a lot of money for a seller. And does anybody get, I'm starting to get these emails from KWRI and it's called the Chew
Yeah.
or whatever this thing is. Yeah, so I guess it's a newsletter, it looks like. In this, though, it said, who would accept, thank you so much. Give her a hand. I was parked. Yeah. I was parched. So it says, who would accept 20% less for their home to avoid stress? It says that over 65% of all first-time sellers say they would accept 20% or less for their home if they could skip on pre-sale stressors like making repairs, staging a house, navigating multiple offers, and worrying the buyer will fall through. And it breaks it down into actually generations. Like baby boomers, it's only 38%, which totally makes sense when you think about that particular generation. Millennials, 74%, Gen X, 68%, Gen Z, 66%. What's interesting to me about this, like these stats, and where my head went, was take these stats and pair it to that. Think about the stress that you just created, should you overprice a home by 50% or overprice, 50% or overprice in 100 days. Now you just played right into probably 60% of the population's biggest concern when you overprice a home. Does that make sense? See that connection? It's not very fiduciary, that's what it is. It's a great way to put it. So this is a cool newsletter. There's some really cool statistics in here also about cooperative compensation, things of that nature. So if you haven't seen this, or check your spam, but there's a lot of cool things in here or in this newsletter that you haven't sent. Love it. Thank
Yeah,
It
the email
really
comes from, I'm with Gary.
Ah.
I'm with Gary, yeah. So again, the simple message here is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, where I understand that you don't want to have the possibility of walking away from money. My concern is, and again, this is all based on the fact that you give an accurate CMA, right, that you're talking with. My concern is by taking that risk, is that risk that you're taking far outweighs what happens. This number, I mean, this to me, and I will tell you from my experience, the money part is a big part here. 100 days on the market is a bigger. Right, and unless they're in a time frame. Now, what this also allows you to do with this information is you have the people that say, honestly, I don't need to sell for at least 100 days. Then you get to make the decision whether or not you want to take it, and also go back to this one that says, and you may still lose money by doing so. Right? So something to keep in mind. All right, question so far.
That's right, something.
There's a really cool dialogue here where you can actually tell.
You speak up a little bit.
Like a really cool dialogue with your sellers is where you're able to actually tell the future. So you go into a neighborhood, there's one other house comparable, and it's listed at $500,000, and that house has been on the market for 35 days, and the seller is like, well, they're listed at 500, so let's go in at 500, and I'm gonna tell you, well, let me tell you what's actually gonna happen. They're gonna have the price reduction by whatever the percentage is that they there. They're gonna sit on the market for another 70 days. They're gonna make 4 more mortgage payments, 3 more mortgage payments. They're gonna have stress. So why don't we just come in now at a price that they're ultimately gonna sell out 70 days? It's sold at 7, because that's what the story is. And then we'll see our property and then eventually drop the price down to where it actually sold. But we're not gonna wait 70 days. We're gonna come on the market, sell 70 days. You can actually do it. That's what that property.
Or if you look
Really?
ahead, then you're not selling all.
That's right.
Okay.
Because 25% don't sell.
So I think that being able to predict the future for yourself is also using all the markets. Oh, we're past 7 days. Exactly.
Right, that's a great point. If it went past 7.
All right, so let's summarize this. This one's, I'm gonna let Vince just. So, slide 18. So this is the real story. So this is the overall story here. This is the game board. Really, this is a game board. if I'm a seller, I wanna end up on the bottom right, I wanna end up in the green. What this says is that you had a total number of closings, again, this is for single family detached, if you want. Out of that total number of closings, 100% of them closed, obviously, 97%, 97.4% of virtual list price, 42 days on the market. But what we just went through kind of breaks down. Let's go to the right-hand side, the ideal side. You don't have to do a price reduction. That means 51% of them did not have to do a price reduction. They got 100% of list price to sales price, and they closed an average of 7 days. Out of that 51%, a very small percentage of them, about 158, about 5.7% of them were previously listed. Those still got 100% of list price, but look at that. Those jumped to 136 days on the market. So the right-hand side means you never had to do a price reduction. Right? But there is a chance that if you missed it and came off the market and had to come back on, it is gonna cause you more time. So if you wait it out, you could possibly get that 100%. You have a 5% chance of getting it, and it will take you almost 5 months to do so. 136 days. So let's make sure we price right. We get 100% of list price to sales price, 5 days on the market. That's side one, or good side. Then we go, yes.
136, including the previous.
Yes, so all of these will include previous days on the market. That's what's really unique about this thing. So if you try to look at these compared directly to the MLS doesn't do days on market specific. I know there's a time frame where they may be cumulative, but they won't do it if they've been on the market, especially if they were off the market for more than 30 days. This will do it if they've been off the market.
Yeah, that's
So, in that, today expired from the section. Is that where it says no price reduction? Does that take you back on the market with the price?
No, they came back on the market at the exact same price. Yeah, which one would question if you came back on the market at the same price? What did you do that for? What did you do that for? Well, 5% of the people said to get full price. I made 5 mortgage payments, but I got 100% of price, right? So,
Of a reduced price.
yeah.
And I probably showed it 20 times.
Yeah. So. So then you go to the price reduction side. So 48% had a price reduction. Their average or their median list price to sales price dropped to 93, and they jumped 100 days on the market. Out of those, they fall into 2 categories. One, were not previously listed, right? Listed with one person, did a price reduction. They closed. I'm on this one right here. They closed. That was about 20% of the market, 95% of list price to sales price, 47 days on the market. Then you have this final 29%. They were previously listed. So that's fascinating, by the way. 30% of the closings in Q1 had expired and came back on the market and closed. Is there an opportunity for expireds and withdrawals right now?
Yeah.
30% of the market were homes that had come off the market and came back on. That's a big number, right? And out of those, if you came off the market, came back on, and had done a price reduction, you're getting 91.8% of list price to sales price, 145 days on the market. So this is a snapshot. You bring a little game piece, put that in front of the seller and say, drop the game piece, so where do you want to land? Or not. I think it.
You got to play Monopoly. I was there for Monopoly.
Sure, exactly. So questions about that?
Yeah, I think it's out.
All right, couple more. So let's talk about failed listings. 19. 24.2% of the homes that sold in Q1 had gone off the market at some point. There's a time frame that's realistic. It's not like they were on the market years ago. They were recently listed and came back on the market. 24%, does that surprise
That
you?
didn't sell.
That didn't,
That didn't sell. 24% didn't sell.
yeah, 24% didn't sell,
Yeah.
right? Does that surprise you?
A little bit, but also look at the $2 million price point number, because that's really high, and that's also not necessarily unexpected. But that's also where a lot of homes are in this market, price wise. I think that's where it helps that 24%
Yeah.
is a larger number, because there's just more houses in that price point than there used to be.
Yeah.
than there
And,
used to be, but relative to the rest of the market, there probably isn't.
yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
so, cause if you look at the price points across the board, right, you still have a 22%. 22.6% and 400 to 500, 500 to 650, you've still got 28%. So yes, and
Right.
is how, yeah, is what I would say to that. I challenged this in the mastermind, cause I thought this was fascinating, It doesn't feel like this stuff, right? And so we were asking the group, like, is this what you're feeling? What, is this true? And we even went so far as to ask the statistician whether they were including, what did we ask them, like, how they were getting to this number?
yeah.
And it's very.
It's an accurate number. Now, will some of these come back on the market and sell?
So that was my question, these are they've canceled or
Yeah,
expired or
but it'll be
something.
accurate.
Yeah, there can be,
Right.
they're withdrawn or expired. I don't know if
Okay.
they do. put cancel in there.
That was the same question. I was asking, are they still on the market or?
No, these are, if they came back on, they did, but haven't sold yet. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is this is the expires and withdrawals divided by expires, withdrawals and closed. So it's an accurate percentage of the total. So if they did come back on the market, they still haven't sold.
And if they did come back on and weren't in that sold each quarter, it'll catch up, like you'll see in the aggregate,
Right.
this being a pretty true number.
Yeah.
So it's something to take into consideration. This has, we said 80% of buyers care about two things, condition and price. But that's interesting, take that perspective and then look at 25% of the homes not selling that we're listing.
Yeah, so going back to Sean's point, this actually has to be true mathematically, because if you look at the demand curve that we've had year over year after year, right? The buyer demand and the sold homes is the same, right? Cumulative throughout the year is the same. Because we have more homes on the market, they have to expire. We don't have the buyers for it. So if you're not pricing it correctly, you're setting your person to be that 25%. At 25%, yeah, it's a little high based off the skewing that you're saying. We're probably more in our price, well, sorry, my price range of 500 and below. We're probably talking 22-23%.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
It's a big number.
Still
Yeah.
big, yeah, that's the
That's
thing,
huge.
still
Yeah,
big.
yeah.
Huge.
And here's the deal, and that's why you watch it over time, is like, the number may still be the same. Now, that same house may not be included in the other one because they probably got price corrected.
Yeah, now if you wanna see something really crazy, do this year over year. It's insane.
Oh, I
So
bet.
watch what happened from 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year and now, it's insane.
And even if if they don't end up in the 25% but you've reduced the price, there's still a massive cost to that seller in days on market and price, right? So, but again, the price is really 48% of homes being overpriced in this market is a fascinating thing, and the impact that has to the seller is extreme. It's 4 months of mortgages, right? So all data that we can use in helping impact the expectations, the standards and expectations of our sellers when we're sitting at the kitchen table.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that new builds are affecting those numbers?
So that is one of the things we're looking at, because we've got about 30% of our transactions overall are new construction, so it could have an impact that's in there. The challenge as it relates to failed is you don't have a lot of builders that withdraw or expire, right? They're not as, and again, we'll look at this number further, but it's not like every time they have a potential home coming on, they put it on the market and then close it out. It's typically one listing that's on the market, drives the buyers there for that information and then closes them out as they come.
Right.
So I don't know that it's gonna have too much of an impact on
Do
it.
you think that buyers are choosing new builds over the houses that are listed because of different pricing points, because of what they want, the flexibility?
Incentives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's gonna be situationally specific. This is where you go to the micro level.
That's gonna be my point.
Yeah, so I will give the example of Nexton. If you look, there's a tale of two markets in Nexton right now. If you look at the trend in median sales prices over the last 6 months in Nexton, it's a pretty steady trend down with new construction, and it is a very strong trend up with resale. You're not seeing that in other new construction neighborhoods. You're seeing new construction neighborhoods where unfortunately, the new construction is causing some reduction of resales as well.
But isn't, I mean, especially with Nexton, there's more resales now than there
our new construction.
It's balanced, it's much, it's a lot more balanced, so even if you were to take like a, Kenny Bay as a whole, or subsections of that, there are subsections of that where resale is outpacing, the number of sales is outpacing new construction, but new construction still drives value. More so than say,
And this is where we're looking at metro data.
Yeah.
Right, and this is where these conversations, as the local real estate expert, we still gotta get to the micro data. Like a great resource for that would be Doug Holmes. Like he sent out his email every Friday, we get how many, I think it's like $12 a month. Right, it's great data, right, but pairing this data then with the metro view and then with the national view can be super impactful to certain buyers and sellers. And he says, I haven't read through all the data yet, but he does say one of the things that he says is new home sales are very weak right now, right? And he looks at contingents on a weekly basis, how many homes are going under contract each week. And there has been an impact, but he also goes into the local markets, like this is what's gonna happening in MLS area AB 1, 2, 3, and this is what's happening in MLS area 4, 5, 6. So you can get that data as well through a service like that.
all right, we've got a couple more slides. We're gonna go through what we're gonna do format wise. We're gonna take a quick break for lunch to introduce our sponsor. You guys take a break, go grab lunch, come back in, and then we've got some closing slides on that, and we'll do a mastermind. Is that, you guys good with that? Clear on that? Awesome. All right, so this next slide basically talks about what the, putting it all together as it relates to overpriced, what happens in this. So for every 100 finalized closings that you have, meaning or finalized listings that came on the market, sorry, for every them, 24 of them failed, likely due to overpricing. Right? If you go down to that, so let's stop there. You go to the right-hand side, that means 76 of them sold. Okay, so now you've got the two options, 76 sold, 24 did not. Out of the 76 that sold, 37 of them had to take a price reduction before they sold. So if you combine the number of ones that had to have a price reduction to the number of ones that did not sell, 61% of every 100 listings is overpriced. That makes sense where that came from? This is why we're feeling this discussion to be difficult, because people aren't, we're not, what's that weird video? Say the weird thing. Like, this is the weird thing that nobody's saying.
That was weird.
Back up, back a little bit.
I mean, nobody's talking about why the market feels the way that it is because 61% of homes went on the market overpriced. And that's causing sellers to be stressed because they have poor expectations because themselves, their listing agents haven't set that expectation for them. It's causing buyers to be stressed. We're seeing all these homes come on the market, so they think there's all this opportunity, because we're even saying there's all these choices, you've got choices. The problem is that 61% of your choices are overpriced.
Right.
So you go out there and you've got people, it's hard. All those do it. It's hard. We gotta be able to talk about it.
Hard that this is a slide right here, should be like, everybody should leave here, put this slide on their Facebook, put this slide on their Instagram, do like a video over this slide.
Speak louder, Ben.
I think, I'm like, yeah.
But you're not. I'm not making it up, and it's not a criticism.
Once I get excited, I'll start talking about lead generation. This slide right here should be on every single person's social media, should be sent out to every single person's database, because this tells the story of the market, and it's super easy to digest. And Alex Donaldson did a great job of putting this slide together to their database, but it tells you everything. So when you're clients are like, how's the market? Here.
Awkward.
And it's super, super easy. So this should be like, you should leave here, take a screenshot, post it, and share the story. Right? Just like.
And yelling.
All right. Okay, so time of death, 11:52. All right.
Hear that?
That is not at all what I heard. All right, so a couple couple more things in here. So 32, next slide, jump to the page, 21, I know we were doing what?
We were doing well.
21. All right, so 32.8% of all sales sold at 100% or more than the original list price. So this is a breakdown of just what percentage got 100% or more, right? And how that broke down in each price point. So just something to keep in mind. This is a good story. There's still, again, you don't have, the narrative here is you don't have to reduce your price if you price correctly. And that's the message that you're looking to get across. Anyone add? No. Okay, days on market for sales. By the way, if you price it correctly and you get at least 100% or more, your days on market are down to 4. Right, and again, broken down per price point here. So again, same story, but from a different angle. Seller paid closing costs. So this is an interesting one. So this is the percentage of the homes that actually paid closing costs. And you're seeing on average, this hasn't changed, roughly 50% of the closings to have some sort of seller concession paid. That's a year-over-year consistency. What's interesting about that is this is a good one to see if there was much of an impact of who's paying closing costs now versus last year based on the changes in the NAR. And this is telling you there was a negligible change because of that. People were paying closing costs or they weren't. It didn't have anything to do with commissions. Now, the next one is going to tell you the dollar amount paid. This is an interesting one, right? So this is saying for a price point, again, this is an expectation slide. Because you'd still be surprised at how many sellers will come in and just say, I don't wanna, what are you talking about closing costs? There's a 50% chance someone's gonna ask you for them, and this is roughly what you could expect they're gonna do. Based on what's there.
And Cynthia, to your point about 650, whereas earlier you were talking about, you were asking about that 650 spot and are they paying more?
Right.
And it took everything in me not to say, yeah. Right, it's 10,000 as compared to the 9,000 or the average be it 8,000. So you're seeing that potentially there is a demand, a pretty solid demand in this space here. Right, yet money has to come from the seller because of perceived or a chance of affordability.
So the question from the, oh, sorry, are we done? Okay, so the question on this, pause before you answer. The question on this, what do you think is the cause for the increase?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, my first thing, because I just went through this, was this driven a lot by the commission change? And I don't think you can really argue that, because what the big factor was affordability.
Right.
Right.
Well, and
Right.
to me, it doesn't suggest there's anything to do with commission, because these numbers don't necessarily indicate that.
Correct, they're not like a certain percentage or anything like that, but now I do believe it was part of it, I do believe, because here's what I do know, it's internally. I mean, we represent 8% of the market in closings, and internally, in the last 6 months last year, we saw a decent, nothing drastic, but a noticeable increase in the percentage of commission per transaction. And I do believe that there is part of it. It may not necessarily mean that there was a shift in what the market's doing. I think it opened the dialogue for a lot of you as buyers agents to say, yes, I'm taking it, I'm going to get paid at least 3%. If they're not gonna pay it, I'm gonna ask for more. And that is your right and privilege to do so. Right? We're not gonna guess, do we? All commissions are negotiable. So just something to keep in mind on that. But I do believe, and this, I was looking at Sean, because we talked about this on Wednesday, and then his belief, and the right one is, this is mainly more than likely driven by increase in rates and affordability for buyers needing. Yeah. Okay.
And if you look at, trying to pull it up, but the internet doesn't work. If you look at savings rates, right? Hey, no. If you look at savings rates, if I remember correctly, back to like 2020 and 2021, savings rates were right around 11% of gross income. Now they're at the lowest they've been in, well, I think a decade, at 1.8%, which tells me that there is less cash on hand for buyers, which then goes to this point of, well, they need cash. Because the cash is in the equity, right? And I think that historically, if I remember, it was over the last 10 years, it was something like 5%, or Yeah, 5% was the average and 8% is historically the average of gross income, or those are flipped, I can't remember 100%, but savings rates are lower dramatically. So that could also impact why sellers are, and price went up, right?
Also having the conversation too with your sellers, of like, hey, would you be able to afford this house that you're in at the like interest rate that it is now? What would it actually cost a buyer like today to be in a fund rate? And then using the neighborhood that you're actually doing the listing in, and you can pull up on MLS the exact concessions that their neighbors were giving out to other people.
Wait, I think that's 100%. Love it.
All right, last two before we take a break, so. Purchases by the method, not a whole lot of change here, kind of stayed fairly steady across the board. A little bit. Yeah, I mean, cash is went down a little bit, again, I don't know that this is telling us a whole lot, staying pretty steady, yeah. All right, so this first part, basically, I mean, here's what we went through, sales, supply. We know the sales price, median was higher, but we've obviously got the number of homes, which is negligible, went down a little bit. Talked about percentage of list price to sales price, days on market, man, that's a big one. I mean, days on market and the impact of having to do a price reduction is a huge one to talk about. Failed listings, again, 24.2%. I think that's a message to make sure the sellers understand there's a risk. That this isn't just throwing it on the market anymore. Talk about overpriced, sales price, list price, seller concessions. All right, give me a couple ahas. We'll have our lunch sponsor take a break and then come back in. So give me a couple ahas on this first section. The 24%? Yeah, 24% failed listing. Okay. What else?
49% overpriced.
49% are overpriced, right? 61% if you take into consideration those that didn't sell. Right? Right? Ben.
Speak up.
All personal facts, and Paul and Sean had a great point that statistically speaking, 25% of our listings have.
Yeah. That's, I mean, honestly, the simplicity of that word different is powerful. That's right. Like, there's, 25% of you cannot sell. It is not possible. So in order to be the 75, you have to be that many. Okay, two more.
I want to give you accurate numbers real quick because I hate giving bad information. 3.8% is the savings rate. The average over the last 10 years was 5.2%. And historically, that savings rate is 8.3%. So the story remains the same. I just want to ensure that I give you the right data.
Yeah.
It's in the vision slides. Probably find those in Connect or Command or what, yeah.
All right, so we have Jessica with Keller Home Loans. It's here. She brought us lunch. Let's give her a hand.
Last time with Keller Home Loans, for those of you who aren't aware, we are the mortgage company specific to Keller Williams agents and their buyers. We do have every single program that any other lender has. The real difference between us and any other lender is we're your in-house tool. We also offer lower closing costs and lower interest rates. Our interest rates are typically about 1/4 point lower than the average lender. So what that means is, one, payments can be a little bit more affordable, and two, it opens up more buying opportunity for your buyers if they are tight on budget. It gives a little bit more room in their budget to do so. We have down payment assistance through states. If there's one we don't know about, like local to a city, we have a fantastic team that is able to reach out and sign us up for those down payment assistance. I think someone had mentioned earlier, like buyers might come and say, well, I'm a teacher, what programs do you have for me? That is what we do. So once I dive into everything, I'm like, okay, where are we at? What do we need? Then I just open up the window for the discussion of like, okay, down payment assistance, does this make sense for you? What programs do we have that make sense for you? And that's really what we do to kind of help those buyers. It's not up to them to figure that out. That is what I do for them. I am the loan officer, and I handle everything 100% myself. I don't have a team. It doesn't get passed off. I handle every single transaction other than my processors and my closers. So the person that you're sending your buyers to, that would be me. I have them from day one initial phone call to the day of closing. So I'm aware of everything going on. I keep in contact with agents and the buyers, and we just make sure that everyone is on the same page. I do have a little bit of a few packets up here if you guys want to take one. There are some really great programs for Keller agents. I've included those in those packets as well for you guys to take a look at. We have an app for agents. So some agents, you know, some of my agents, they don't want a text or a phone call or an email. They just want to know when it's closing, or they want to be able to check on their own. We do have an app that you're able to download. It'll tell you every single thing of the process. Have documents been received? Has appraisal been ordered? All the good stuff. So if you don't want to hear from me, you don't have to. I do have an app that tracks it, sends out updates. Your buyers have the same app and they're able to see those things as well. I am Ohio, but I am here in South Carolina and Charleston at least once a month. Hoping to be a little bit more, so, anything you guys need from me, if you wanna set up one-on-one meetings, chat, see what I have to offer, and what we can do for you and your buyers, I would absolutely love to do that. I'm really just here as a resource and a tool for you guys and how I can help you and your business grow and help serve your clients. Any questions for me?
What was your name one more time?
My name is Jessica.
Thanks.
Sorry, I also don't talk very loud unless I'm yelling at my kids. So, I do a lot of mom voice at home, so I try not to do it when I'm out, so. Anything else? No?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. We'll take about 15 minutes, grab lunch, come back in. If we need more time, that's fine, but come back in. We're gonna go through some slides while you eat, mastermind, and get out of here. So we'll come back in, get started back at 12:20. 12:20.